There are names that will live forever in the archives of the Sith, names etched into the temples of Dromund Kaas, remembered with reverence and with fear. And then there are those that vanish, not because they were weak, not because they failed, but because they revealed something the Sith could not bear to remember. Darth Ikoral was one of those names. His statues still stand in the forgotten corners of Kaas City. His victories remained listed in the records of ancient campaigns. His bloodline was pure, his honor unmatched, his devotion absolute. For centuries he was celebrated as a war hero, a symbol of what the Sith once were: proud, ruthless, unbending. And yet, there is a second half to his life that no archive will show. It was deleted. The truth of why is the kind of story the Empire tries to bury deep so that no whispers remain. The story of a man who left the galaxy in search of his people and returned as something else entirely. Darth Ikoral was born in an ancient line of pure-blooded Sith, a family that's traced its ancestry all the way back to King Adis, the first lord of the Sith species. His family sigil was older than the Empire itself, its roots carved into the oldest stones of Korriban. He believed that blood carried memory, that within him ran the unbroken current of the dark side's original vessels. When the reconstituted Sith Empire returned from their exile, Ikoral rose quickly. He mastered strategy as easily as he mastered the Force. It ran in his blood. His campaigns across the Outer Rim were brutal, efficient, and precise. He was the kind of commander who never needed to raise his voice. His soldiers said that when he entered the battle, the air itself seemed to tighten in reverence. The Emperor Vitiate rewarded him personally, a rare event. Ikoral's name appeared in proclamations and war chronicles. He became one of the few living Sith to be honored in the Hall of Triumph on Dromund Kaas. To the aristocracy, he was a living reminder of the Sith Empire's ancient destiny. But to Darth Ikoral, that destiny was slipping away. He saw a quiet infection spreading through the Sith Order, humans rising up in the academies, aliens commanding fleets, bloodlines mingling. The very word Sith was no longer a species, but a title that anyone could claim. To him, that was heresy. He began to speak openly about a need to restore the pure-blooded race, to rekindle what he had called the sacred strain. And when he heard of rumors of Sith colonies that had fled the Great Hyperspace War and never rejoined with the Emperor and his new empire, he saw salvation. The others called it myth, he called it proof. Ikoral went before the Dark Council and demanded permission to lead an expedition into the uncharted regions of space to recover their lost kin, to return the blood of King Adis to its rightful throne. Surprisingly, the Council granted it. Some did so out of curiosity, some just to be rid of him. And so, Darth Ikoral left the galaxy, commanding his ship, the Red Reaper, and vanished deep into the void. The Empire celebrated and elevated him as a hero, even in his absence. Statues were raised. The pure-blooded nobility of the Empire recited oaths in his name. The children of Korriban were told that Darth Ikoral had gone to bring their ancestors home. Decades passed. His legend grew even cleaner. But legends are easier to worship when they don't return. Ikoral's journey took him into the dark edges of space, in the galaxy where maps burned to static and the Force itself seemed to shift its tone. He found remnants of ancient worlds, buried temples, glass cities shattered by time and by war, the bones of civilizations that had drowned in their own power. And then he found them, the descendants of those who had fled the Great Hyperspace War, isolated enclaves of purebloods who had hidden for centuries. They remembered the old rites, though barely. They lived in worship of echoes. To them, Ikoral was not a visitor, but a prophecy fulfilled. Ikoral united them. He taught them how to channel their ancient strength through ritual and through discipline. He studied their scriptures and merged them with the Empire's newer knowledge of alchemy and genetics. He became a prophet, their spiritual leader and literal guide. In the process, he learned things that had been forgotten since the time of the ancients. How to preserve the body with will alone, how to bind the spirit to flesh through symbols, how to make the living Force obey metal. The Red Reaper, his vessel, became both his fortress and his temple, his monument. Within its halls, strange machines began to hum, engines that fed on the Force itself, their conduits running with crimson light. For 70 years, these rites sustained him. His followers aged, they even died. But he did not. And when he finally turned back towards the Empire, his body was unbroken, his strength undiminished, the rituals had worked, and Darth Ikoral was whole. When the Red Reaper reappeared in Imperial space, the announcement shook the aristocracy. Darth Ikoral, the Lost Crusader, had finally returned. He expected a hero's welcome, Instead, he found an empire he no longer recognized. The Emperor Vitiate had vanished from public life, his will carried out by politics and bureaucracy. The Dark Council was filled with species that Ikoral once would have enslaved. Humans stood as equals to purebloods. Alien lords commanded fleets. And worst of all, the Empire had made peace with the Republic and peace with the Jedi. He walked the halls of Dromund Kaas and saw faces that looked wrong. He listened to the Council's words and heard compromise instead of conquest and glory. It wasn't just a corruption, it was a complete transformation. The empire he had loved, the one that he had honored, the one that honored his very blood, no longer existed. And that revelation broke him. The man who had endured decades of exile, who had defied death through knowledge and ritual, stood in the capital of his people and realized that he had outlived his purpose. Ikoral withdrew to the Red Reaper again. At first he saw understanding. He performed the rituals that had preserved him, binding his life essence to his engines, drawing strength from the dark side as he had always done. But without faith, rituals become madness. He began pushing them further, merging blood and circuitry, amplifying the power that coursed through his veins. The alchemy that had once sustained him now unmade him. He scarred his body with new runes, drawing the force through his veins until his skin glowed from within. He fused his armor into his flesh, linking it with the same conduits that fed his ship. The Red Reaper and its master became a single organism, pulsing with energy, whispering to itself. The halls changed with him. They breathed faintly, as if the air moved beneath the metal. The lights flickered in patterns that resembled a heartbeat. Those who still served him began to speak in half sentences, their eyes glazed as though they shared a single dream. When the rituals reached their peak, Ikoral no longer slept. His mind was awake at all times, scattered across thousands of machines and spells, half in the material world and half in the realm of pure force. His body remained upright, but the man within him had become something blurred and incomplete. He still remembered what he had seen on Dromund Kaas. He remembered the impurity, the peace, the betrayal. The thought gnawed at him until every meditation became hatred. The rituals answered that hatred. They whispered to him. They told him that purity could be remade, that he could burn the weakness out of the galaxy. And he believed them. When the Red Reaper next moved through hyperspace, it no longer bore the insignia of the Sith Empire. Its hull was blackened, etched with symbols that burned faintly from within. The ship's energy signature pulsed like a living thing. And then the attacks began. Republic freighters were torn apart without warning. Jedi ships were found adrift, their crews missing, their hulls carved with Sith sigils. Even Imperial convoys began to vanish. Ikoral was attacking indiscriminately, driven not by strategy, but by fury and madness. The man who had once commanded armies with perfect discipline was now a storm with zero direction. Inside the ship, the survivors spoke of hearing a voice. The purebloods that he had united, now his servants. All they heard was him echoing through the walls, booming and whispering all at once. They said the metal itself shuddered when he spoke, and that the ship moved as though guided by anger. He had become an extension of his own madness. By now, the alchemy that had preserved him for decades was destroying him. His body flickered with red light where veins had once been. His armor was no longer worn, it was grown into him. His eyes glowed faintly through the mask, and when he spoke, sparks bled from the seams in his mouth. He called himself the last true Sith, the last legacy of King Adis. To the Empire, he was a liability now. To the Republic, he was a terror and a horror, an abomination. To himself, he was the final prophet of purity, consumed by the same rituals that made him strong. The Dark Council themselves could not allow his existence. He had become a complete embarrassment. The Sith Empire's official line still honored Darth Ikoral as a martyr of the old way. To admit that he had returned as a monster would shatter that myth. So the Council issued no proclamation, no decree. They simply sent a message to Darth Malgus. Malgus had once been the apprentice of the Sith Darth Vindican, who in turn had been Ikoral's student long ago. The task was fitting, a new generation erasing the old. Malgus assembled a small strike team. Their mission was not conquest, it was a burial. They entered the Red Reaper through the hole, cutting through a layer of half-melted metal that seemed to bleed vapor. The corridors were lined with corrosive machinery that pulsed faintly, leaking a red luminescence. Sounds echoed without source. Voices, footsteps, breathing. Everywhere they turned, they found what had once been Ikoral's followers. Their bodies were twisted into shapes the human eye struggled to process. Some were still alive, kept breathing by the same circuits that ran through the walls. At the heart of the ship, they eventually found him. He stood inside a ring of machinery that looked like both a throne and a cage. Energy crawled across his armor in living streams. His presence pressed against the senses like a scream without sound. When he turned, the force itself recoiled. His voice came in two tones, one human, one mechanical. He spoke of corruption, of the death of the Sith species. And then the room exploded in motion. Power poured from his armor in torrents. Machinery came alive, striking at the intruders. The strike team fought through a storm of energy and delusions. Visions of Korriban, of dead gods, of blood pouring upward into the sky. His strength was terrifying, but he was no longer whole. His mind drifted between lucidity and delirium. His power erupted in random bursts that tore the ship apart piece by piece. Each blow from the team severed a conduit. Each wound to his body sent spasms through the Red Reaper itself. Finally, one of the engines collapsed inward, and the energy sustaining the entire network surged back into its source. The Sith Lord staggered. His armor cracked, revealing light instead of flesh. He reached out as if to command the Force itself, and yet, even it refused him. The room went white. When it cleared, there was nothing left but fragments of metal, faint light pulsing in the floor, and silence. The Red Reaper drifted dead in space. The Dark Council of Droman Kos received Malgus's report. The details were sealed immediately. The incident was labeled a classified security threat. Publicly, Darth Ikoral remained the lost hero who had never returned from this noble quest. The truth was locked away, along with every file, every transmission, every name connected to the Red Reaper. The Empire needed its saints more than its sinners. They deleted him not because of fear, but because his story was too honest. Ikoral was what the Sith saw when they looked too closely at themselves. A man who worshipped strength until it consumed everything. A man who worshipped only his own blood. To remember him would be to admit that even the purest Sith could decay into chaos once purpose was gone. And so they let the legend live, and the truth die. His statues remained. The speeches continued. His name became a symbol of loyalty, of devotion to the Empire's cause. No one mentioned what had crawled back from the void wearing his face. But among archivists and inquisitors, rumors still persist. Somewhere in restricted sectors of Imperial databases, a redacted report still sits, and that within it lies a single line written by Malgus himself. He was already dead when we found him. The body simply hadn't realized it yet. Some say the Red Reaper still drifts at the edge of Imperial space. Its engines occasionally flicker to life. Its signal faint, but steady and real. Scavengers who approach report hearing voices over their transmitters. A man speaking in Old Sith, repeating the same words over and over again. I found them. I brought them home. No one stays long enough to see what is inside. The Empire does not investigate. It is easier to let the past rot quietly in the dark. Ikoral remains a name that exists in two halves. The first, the hero, the crusader who carried the pride of the Sith species into the unknown. The second, the heretic, the thing that returned, hollowed out by the very power that he sought to preserve. In the end, he became the most fitting symbol of all, a Sith who embodied the purity of the dark side until it stripped him of everything else. A man the Empire needed to honor and then erase. Because sometimes, the truest reflections are the ones that must be shattered. But tell me, what do you think was worse for a Sith? To be forgotten, or to be remembered for what they became? This was another tale pulled from the oldest layers of Sith history. The true skeleton remains, but we've shaped it with drama and detail so that you can feel what may have been. The truth is still there, buried beneath the story, waiting for those who seek it. But as always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the archives here today, and as always, may the Force be with you.